Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with us this evening is actually a familiar face. She's been on our podcast for season one. Her episode was Blueprint to Blessings. She shared a phenomenal story, a very powerful story that would end up being one of my more popular episodes in the first season, and it actually launched her an invitation to share her story on other platforms as well. I've had a chance to know this phenomenal woman for well over 20 years. So she's about as close as family as it gets. She's an entrepreneur, she's a mom, she's a grandmother. But her most important title is that she's a woman of God. And she's yet again taking time out of her busy schedule to actually come back and hang out with us to share what her experience was like being on the podcast the first time around, as well as giving us an update of some things that have gone on since then. So again, it is a pleasure as always to have her with us, and I'm pleased to introduce to some, may be familiar with her, but to others, this may be your very first time. Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest, Miss Tia Spaulding. Tia, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you again for having me. Again, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to my listeners, as I shared with you before, she was on the original season one episode, Blueprint to Blessing. So if you have not had the opportunity to check that out, I definitely do encourage you to do so. Please check it out. You won't be disappointed. You might want to check it out first and then follow right back up with this one so you can kind of piece the two together. So it'll definitely be worth your while. But before we get into our questions for this evening, Tia, I do want, again, for those who are not familiar with you, if you would share a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, give them a taste of who is Tia Spaulding.
Well, I am Tia Spaulding again, and I am originally from Indiana. That's where I was born and raised, but I currently live in Metro Atlanta. I say Metro Atlanta because I'm in the suburbs, and they don't play about that saying that you live in Atlanta when you actually live in the suburbs. So I'm gonna say Metro Atlanta. I am an interior designer, and I'm also an interior design professor. So that, like you said, I'm also a mother, a sister, a grandmother, a friend. So that is just a little bit about me.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm thinking when you were on during season one, I don't even think you had the grandmother title just yet at
I
that time. It's
don't
more,
think, I don't remember if he was born yet. He may have not been. I think he was still baking in the oven during
right. I
that
think he was still in the process.
time.
He was still marinating, but hadn't quite
Yeah, he was
arrived just
still
yet.
baking.
So just right out the gate, we got a new title to add to your
Yep,
status here. So again, I'm sure that I know for a fact that's been an awesome experience for you from the various pictures
absolutely.
and things of that nature that
Yep,
you've posted on social media. So we
absolutely.
definitely have a proud grandmother or whatever your preferred. I don't know what have you
I'm
designed.
Gammy.
You
I'm
Gammy,
Gammy.
okay. So
Yes, I'm
Gammy.
Gammy.
So that's awesome. That's awesome. So good stuff. And again, I'm excited for you to be back on, and I know my
Thank you.
listeners are eager to hear what's happened with you. Aside from becoming a Gammy, you have had
Hmm.
some pretty big things go on since the last time you were on board. For those who didn't hear the original episode, and I'm not going to give too much away on that, but of course, your primary topic of discussion that you spoke around during that time was the fact of having gone through a divorce. And so,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
Tia is going to build a little bit more on that because there have been some things that have happened since then that I think you
Hmm.
all are going to be interested in finding out about. So, so with that said, anytime I bring somebody back on the show. It's not just about giving us an update on what's been going on. I like to take a few moments actually to tap into what the experience itself was like being on the podcast because interestingly enough, since I've been doing the podcast here we are in season three. Many of my guests that I've brought on board have actually never been on a podcast before. So
Hmm.
it's usually a first time experience for many of them. And interesting enough, beyond that, many of them, in doing so, are sharing stories that they've either only told a very few people in their lives about what it is that they've shared, or in a lot of instances, they're actually sharing something for the very first time and doing it on such
Hmm.
a broad, open, pretty much worldwide platform that anybody could tap into. So, which in itself takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength to be able to do that, especially if the stories that they're sharing is something that taps into maybe perhaps a painful or trying
Hmm.
experience in life. So Again, you being able to do that the first go around, meant a great deal. Being open and transparent as you were, because your story definitely was a blessing to many who tuned in, as well as a blessing to me in hearing it. So,
Thank
with
you.
that said, if you would share with me, what was your initial reaction when I sent that message out to you and said, Tia, I want you to be a guest on my podcast. It was season 1. I'm new to this. I'm a rookie in the game trying to figure it all out, and I had you on my list of people to check out, to inquire about being a guest. So when you got that invite, I'm curious to know, what were your thoughts when you first opened the message up and saw that the invite was there, and what ultimately led you to decide, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and accept this invite and do this.
The message, I, I was like a podcast. I've never. I I think I have enjoyed podcasts. I like to listen to them myself, but I never imagined that I would be on one. At least not at that point in my life. So when I first got your email, it was like, okay, how will I do this? How am I going to say the things that I need to say and be interesting enough for it to be a good episode? Because at that moment, I think more so I was kind of concerned about I wanted to be a great guest for your podcast for you. And so I was like, how can I best show up to do that? And then after kind of thinking about all of that and the nuances with that, I said, what is the worst that can happen? Like, what is the worst that can happen? And then I started to think about once you had, given me the topic and the things that we were going to discuss, I started to think about the message and what I could share. And it was a painful thing that I went through. So, okay, well, I'm going to be basically not necessarily fully reliving it, but somewhat reliving some of the things that I went through that were difficult during that era. And how can I best speak about these things without them being traumatic to me? And luckily, I was in therapy during that time. And so I had kind of worked through a lot of the trauma that I went through and just the pain of getting a divorce and all of that. I worked a little bit through some of that. So once I kind of got over my nerves, I was really excited about being on the podcast because I felt like maybe there was something that I could share that was someone else. And I was on a healing journey. So being on, I felt like somebody else that listens to this episode that I'm on of this, they may be at the beginning of that journey. So they haven't walked
Mhm.
all the way through it and gotten to where I'm at in that journey currently in that time. And so I thought I could possibly help somebody else that is beginning this journey. They can see, hey, I'm going through something difficult right now. But look at her. She's up here speaking about her story and she's doing it without breaking down. She's encouraging. So I really want it to be an encouragement to other people. So that was ultimately what convinced me to go ahead and do the podcast episode.
Right. Well, that's awesome, and I love the approach that you took with this. Again, the way that the podcast obviously is set up is, we talk about, our storms, our moments of adversity, and how we work through those situations, and ultimately we're able to overcome them. So, I already know going in that as I solicit different people to come on board, and not always knowing what story they're going to even tell. Most times, I don't know what story they're
Mm-hmm.
going to share,
Mm-hmm.
but oftentimes it's going to come from, a dark place that they've gone through in life, or
Mm-hmm.
perhaps whether it's something they recently just got out of, or something that happened a long time ago, but that it still is embedded in their memory. So I love that
Mm-hmm.
you thought about, how can I impact somebody, through something that was otherwise a painful time for me. How can I turn that situation into something that could be a blessing to someone else in
Mm-hmm.
sharing that? I think that's a great approach, and it would definitely be a suggestion that I would have for anybody,
Mm-hmm.
who's thinking about, accepting a podcast invite. Obviously, it's important to make sure that, who you're getting the invitation from, that this is a space that you feel like, it's going to be a safe space, meaning, I'm not going to be
Mm-hmm.
judged. I'm not going to be, put on blast, so to speak, the whole shock TV effect, if you will, kind of thing, but that it's
Mm-hmm.
genuinely coming from a place where we're trying to be of encouragement, we're trying to uplift,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think your approach to it all made for that to take place. And I love the fact that you said that at the time, and perhaps this is, I'm just calling it God's timing, but I'm glad to know that at the time that I reached out to you, that you had already begun the process of therapy. So you were
Mm-hmm.
already on that healing journey. Not to say that you were fully where you wanted to be, but you were at a
Right,
point where you
right.
could comfortably, as you said, comfortably talk about it, and not, like I said, every other word, every other sentence go through a breakdown or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it would have made the original episode bad if you shed a tear or had an emotional moment, but it's just you being comfortable. I think a big piece of that healing process is when you get comfortable with being able to share the story, whatever that story is, and not be feeling any kind of, not so much nervousness, but not feeling shame, not feeling
Right.
embarrassed by it,
Absolutely.
not still beating yourself about what took place and feeling like as if you failed or anything like that. There was nothing about your energy in the episode that suggested that that was the place that you were in. It was clearly something that was still very present in your life, and it wasn't like you had forgotten
Absolutely.
about it. It happened, and I'm sure it's still even into the in even today, to talk about the subject. I mean, it's when you go through a divorce, anybody who's been there,
Mm-hmm.
I've been down that path myself before, and it's not something that I would wish on my worst enemy.
I agree. I agree.
Unless you've been there and felt what that's like, only then do you really know the emotional and mental anguish that kind of comes with that. And it takes a while to process through it
Absolutely.
and make it to that side of yourself to where you are comfortable in your skin, and it's not weighing you down anymore. You're not losing sleep and stressing out about it anymore, but that you're at peace, that hey, it
Mm-hmm.
didn't work out, it's unfortunate, I didn't plan it that way, but this is the
Absolutely.
position I'm in. But I'm not going to let myself stay stuck. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
take steps to heal, ignite that healing process, so that I can begin to move forward, with whatever life has for me. Be it a new marriage, a new relationship, or if it just means that from now on I'm gonna be single. Whatever that is,
Absolutely.
I want to prepare myself to receive that, because if I don't take the time out to heal, if I don't take the time out to work through that situation, a new situation could come my way, a new person could come into my life, and I might miss out on something that was intended to be good for me. That this could have been different, but now I can't
Mm-hmm.
receive it, because I'm still stuck
Mm-hmm.
in and bottled up with my emotions and my anger and my frustrations and all of that. So again, I appreciate the way that you went about doing it, and finally arrived at that point where you felt comfortable in saying yes. And of course, I'm thankful that you wanted to be a quote unquote good guest. But for me, while I appreciate that sentiment from anybody who comes on, and I've heard people say that, I wanted to make sure I sounded right, or
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
came off a good way or whatever. Again, a lot of times, that's why I always tell people, beforehand, when we go into our recordings, is just to share as God leads you. Because if you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it in that manner, if you're just doing it based upon whatever He put imparts in you to pour out, it now becomes more flowing and more natural versus
Mm-hmm.
being rehearsed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's really critical as we're sharing such stories like these, that we're relatable to whoever
I
is tuning
agree.
in. We don't want to. That's why I don't really make a big deal about edits and things of that nature, because I want
Mm-hmm.
it to be raw and relatable, and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look like we kind of polished it up to clean it up in a way to spoon feed it to people. They need to you need to meet them where they are,
That's
and I think your
very true.
episode did a wonderful job in doing such things. And of course, I think that was a big piece in you being able to get invited on other platforms to share as well, because of the way you told the
Mm-hmm.
story. You kept it real. I guess that's the best way for us to say
Absolutely.
it. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful so much for that. So with that said, so now you've accepted the invite. The day has come for the recording to take place of the episode. Um, I don't know if you had the opportunity, and I want you to elaborate on this. If you had an opportunity to share with anybody beforehand that you were actually doing this. Um, so with that said, I'm curious to know if for those that maybe you told beforehand that, hey, I'm gonna be on this podcast and this is kind of what I'm gonna be talking about. I'm curious to know, what did any of those individuals have to say to you, good, bad, or otherwise, in terms of your decision in that regard. And then, of course, after the episode actually aired and people had a chance to check it out, many did check it out. I'm curious to know what kind of feedback did you get from those people who tuned
Mhm.
in and they saw you, and witnessed and observed everything that your body language and the words that you shared and the story that you told. I'm curious to know what was that feedback like for you, and how did it make you feel as you were getting this feedback from those who knew beforehand and of course viewed it afterwards.
Well, the only two people that I remember telling at the time was my two sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, I said, well, I'm going to be on a podcast. And they were both like, a podcast? Like, what? And so I explained to them the scenario and all of that. And they were like shocked. They were just like shocked. They were like, we can't believe that you're going to be on a podcast. But then my youngest sister and then my middle sister piggybacked off of this point. She said, well, you've been doing a lot of things that are kind of stepping outside of what we would feel is your comfort zone. And so even though we're kind of shocked that you're doing a podcast, we're not shocked because taking these leaps and these jumps and just doing would have never expected you to do. So they were really excited for me. I don't know if they totally understood everything about it, but they were excited to hear that I was doing something that was out of the norm for me. They were kind of
Mm-hmm.
proud of that point. And then once it aired, they did get a chance to go and watch the episode. And they were both like, you did a phenomenal job. And there were other people in my family. I didn't expect that. I don't know if we posted it, or I think you may have posted it and tagged me in the
Mm-hmm.
post, but I didn't expect as many of my family members. They probably were being nosy. Let's just be real about it. But I didn't expect as many of my family members to watch it that did. So my sisters watched the episode, some other members of my family watched the episode, and everybody had pretty much the same reaction. They were like, you did a great job. Like, you told your story. You didn't, it wasn't a smear
Mm-hmm.
campaign. You did it respectfully and it was very encouraging. So I got feedback from my family and my sisters, which were the two I told about it originally. And then I cannot remember how he got the information. I can't remember if one of my sisters, somebody shared it with him, but my ex, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but he even got message about the episode and he went and watched it and he was like, I'm very proud of you. You did an amazing job. Like, it was very encouraging. It was uplifting to him,
Mm-hmm.
magically. It was uplifting to him. So I got a lot of positive feedback and I was very happy. I was, even without the feedback, I was very happy that I went ahead and did the podcast because, again, it was me stepping out of a comfort zone and me doing something that I would have never imagined I did before and doing it in a way that, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a professional, but I did it in a way that you'd have thought I've done it before, that
Mm-hmm.
episode. So I was very proud of the fact that I was able to do that. So I was glad I did it. I was proud of myself, but it did feel good to get positive feedback from my family and a couple of my friends as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And like I said, we had in that first season, your episode was one of the more popular ones that I had that first
Mm,
season, and as you said, many people commented and told me about the episode, and obviously as I mentioned earlier, of course, a friend of mine that I had been on their podcast before that you told them about that they actually saw your episode is how it
mhm,
happened, and then they inquired with me about, hey, can you connect us to get her on our show,
mhm,
because
mhm,
they felt your energy, they felt your sincerity, your authenticity in sharing, and of course you had a chance to be with them, with Pastor Gary and Gina
mhm,
on their
mhm.
show, and of course you did a phenomenal job there, and they have,
Thank you.
because they
They
had
were
been doing it,
wonderful.
they had been doing it a little bit longer than me, of course, so you got a chance
Mhm,
to be tapped into a whole much broader audience, even
mhm.
stretching internationally. They had a chance to check out
Oh,
your episode on their show. So yeah, they also shared with me that a lot of positive feeling. People were feeling you. The energy was there,
yeah.
and they just loved again, you're just your realness in sharing the
Thank
story.
you.
So I'm glad to hear that. And then of course, because I was going to ask you, and but you already tapped into it about, your husband, you know, checking the episode out and how he
Mm-hmm.
received it, because that was one of the things that I thought, that I really loved about your episode, is that it was not a smear campaign.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, you didn't get on there, making him seem like he was the scum of the earth, the worst person ever to know, or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. And of course, I've had an opportunity, for my listeners who don't know, obviously, I've had an opportunity to meet him personally on
Mm-hmm.
multiple occasions. We've spent time around each other, etc. So know him very well. Very nice guy. For the record, for anybody that's tuning in, it was just one of those scenarios that unfortunately sometimes happens in marriages, where
Mm-hmm.
marriages come into certain conflicts, roadblocks, and sometimes the two partners involved can't work it out, and it leads
Mm-hmm.
to the unfortunate conclusion of there being a divorce coming into
Mm-hmm.
existence. But even in a divorce, it doesn't make the two people involved horrible people, because they came into the
Absolutely.
marriage imperfect, with their baggage, with their
Mm-hmm.
flaws, with their issues. And that's what makes marriage
Mm-hmm.
so challenging, but at the same time so worthwhile, when you can do it and make it through to the ending of it, because of the fact that you're bringing two imperfect people together to try to stick together and work together, even in the midst of chaos and challenges and things of that nature, and
Mm-hmm.
still stick by one another's side, and fight it through in spite of whatever is going on around them, or within that marriage. So yeah, I thought the way you handled it was very, very mature, very upstanding. You made it clear the things that you had issues with, but you also
Mm-hmm.
brought forth, what you felt like you could have done better, or things that you should have
Absolutely.
taken into consideration that might have, tipped the scales on how things played out, or some of the things that you had to experience. Maybe they wouldn't have been as rough.
Mm-hmm.
Had you done it a little bit differently, had you spoke on certain things sooner rather
Mm-hmm.
than later, and
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. So I thought it was very fair, and for him to give you that feedback, I know that probably had to be one of the more significant of the feedbacks. Not
Mm-hmm.
that you were seeking per se his approval, but just the
Absolutely. I
fact that he
wasn't.
gave it voluntarily and willingly, and had something positive to say, versus, oh, you just put me out there, put me on blast, making me seem like, because unfortunately there would have been some ladies in the same situation that would have gone that route,
Yep.
and would not have had any regrets about doing so. They would have welcomed the opportunity to put him on blast across the internet, for anybody to check out. So I,
And
I, I
that just
love.
wasn't my angle
Hmm.
with that, because for me, that wasn't productive for
Right.
me in that moment, because anything that I needed to personally say that may come across as putting him out there, or, a smear. I could say that to him personally. Like, that wasn't
Hmm.
my angle for this platform. It wasn't the platform nor the episode for that. Plus, like I said, I was on a healing journey. So
Hmm.
you can't be on a healing journey and still be carrying all of that anger and things that you might be feeling in that moment that make you want to lash out. You can't be carrying all that when you're on the healing journey. You have to work through those things and get to a place where you are comfortable with the fact that, like you said, it just didn't work out. It's difficult, but what good is it going to be for me to go ahead and bash him? And not to mention the fact that we both share families.
Hmm.
When you have a long term marriage, you've buried each other's families. So you have a
Hmm.
long relationship with them, and even children involved. So the fact that we have children and we have mutual family, that just wasn't productive for me. It wasn't the right thing for me to do. And I didn't feel like that was the right thing for me to do.
And I love the fact that you pointed out the family component to it, especially the children, because a lot of times in divorce type situations, you'd be surprised, or perhaps you wouldn't be, but it's surprising to a lot of people how the kids are
Mm-hmm.
hurt the most
Mm-hmm.
by a situation,
Mm-hmm.
not just because the two parents are pulling apart from one another in terms of the decision to divorce, but just the hostility, whether it's the,
Mm-hmm.
the the verbal abuse, the emotional
Mm-hmm.
abuse, the fighting, the arguing, the you can't see your kids, and
Mm-hmm.
and the battles about money, and all of the other messy stuff that is just really, like you said, it's just not productive. It
And
doesn't.
what it does is, it's like, you might be going through some trauma because of
Mm-hmm.
whatever happened in the relationship, but now you're traumatizing them. So now
Mm-hmm.
you're causing them trauma in an already difficult situation. Doing that type of thing just, again, further causes them trauma, and it's just not necessary.
I agree. I totally agree. So I want to go back to the in the moment of telling your story because I'm curious to know, and I'd like you, of course, for you to share with our listeners as you were at that point of the conversation. This is usually, kind of early on in our conversation where I ask the common question about tell me about a time
Hmm.
when you faced a challenging situation that seemed insurmountable to get through to overcome. This is usually when we kind of entering into the big moment of the core of our discussion for this evening. So I'm curious to know from you when that moment was there and you're about to tell the story, what were some of the emotions and thoughts that were going in your mind right before you were getting ready to begin to tell it, as you're telling it, and when you finally said those last words and getting the story out? What was that, the thought process, the emotions that you were feeling as you were going through the sharing of the story?
Well, I wanted first to be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a real thing that had happened in my life, and it was current. So it was important for me to be authentic. But another thing it was for me, it was freeing. It gave me a sense of peace, even though that may not make sense to. It gave me a sense of peace to be able to discuss it. It helped me understand that I really am healing, because there was a time where I couldn't even formulate the sentence, we're getting a divorce. Like, I couldn't even get that out without falling apart, right? And so the fact that I was able to sit up, talk about it, and do it with grace, it let me know that I really am healing. I'm getting to a better place. I'm getting to the other side. I've gone through my 5 stages of grief and I've reached acceptance, because the fact that, like I said, I can sit up and discuss this in a way where I'm not falling apart, it made me feel good to be able to do that. So I wanted to be authentic, and that was my purpose, was to be authentic. But then also, I knew something in my spirit just let me know that somebody needed to hear this story. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
needed to hear the story. Somebody needed to be encouraged. Somebody needed to be encouraged to know that things are going to be okay, that today might be a bad day, you might be going through a bad time in life and challenging. But there is another side of this. If you just pray and you just walk through your healing journey, you will get to the other side of this pain, discouragement, whatever it is that you're feeling. So I knew that my message would help someone else. So I had to be authentic and just basically just be honest. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about what I was going through at that point in my life, and give a message that I know, like I said, that even though it was difficult, it would help other people.
Love that. Love that. And I think the thing that stands out to me, what you just said, was about how it freed you. There was a
Hmm.
there was
It was
a
very
freeing
free.
as you're speaking and getting this story out, something that maybe had never done to the extent that you did it. And of course,
Hmm.
on a platform like this, obviously,
Hmm.
to finally, okay, I'm at this point that I got to tell a story. I'm telling it, and I get that final word out of my mouth. It's almost like an exhale, if you will, that
Yeah,
just
like you, exactly like you exhale. Yes, it is a weight
there's a weight
off
up
of
off
you.
of
Like
you.
you, a weight was lifted off of you.
Yeah, so that's awesome, and I'm glad that that was the experience for you. That it was a freeing moment for you. It was a lifting up off of you, even though you were working on things, going through your therapy, going through
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
stages and everything. But just to be able to, okay, I said this, and I'm still okay. I'm still
Hmm.
composed. I haven't fallen apart. I'm not, I haven't lost my mind. I didn't break down. I was able to say it. I was able to do it with composure. I was able to do it with poise. I was able to do it with class. And I was able to be genuine, authentic, and sincere in what I shared. Just truly being transparent. And so those are all key things on anybody's platform, that if you're going to share, especially sharing things of that level, that you do it that way because of the fact that
Absolutely.
somebody, again, is going to need to hear that story. And We
Absolutely.
don't know their names, we don't see their faces, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a listening ear out there that tunes into to these podcast episodes, and you just don't know. You're blessing somebody, might even be saving somebody's life. It depends
Yes.
upon the situation, because divorce is something that is such a devastating, such a traumatic experience that some
Hmm.
people, if we're being real, some people don't see a reason to live anymore.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
they might take extreme measures
Hmm.
to exhibit that, whether
Hmm.
it's literally taking their lives or whether it's just going into a reckless state where they just kind of wild out and do whatever that wild out looks like, whether it's indulging in alcohol, drugs, if it's
Hmm.
sexual indulgence where they just kind of wild out, I'm just gonna do whatever, however, it
Hmm.
varies from person to person, but that's a very real thing. So again, I appreciate your approach, and I'm glad that that experience was freeing for you, and that as a host, doing a show like this and knowing what kind of range of emotions can come from that. It's refreshing to me to know, and it kind of gives me confirmation that not that I say that I have a perfect podcast, but that I'm kind of on pace and doing things in such a way that makes people feel, again, safe, that makes them have
Absolutely.
that
And that was,
opportunity to yeah, just I want you to feel safe. I want you to
yeah, I
feel
definitely felt safe. That
relief.
was definitely,
You
yep.
know, yeah. Like I said, I'm not here to be the next reality TV show or
Oh,
anything like
please
that.
no.
But you know, but I do want people when they're done that they feel good about what they did. That they it
Absolutely.
that was a positive experience for them, not rather than it being a negative experience for them. So,
Yes.
knock on wood, I've been blessed that with all of these episodes over the first two seasons and now in season three, that's been the experience for everybody. So I pray to keep that streak going, because that's the intent, behind
Yes.
it all. So appreciate that.
Thank
So
you.
Tia, if you had to offer up some words of encouragement to those who, they're hearing you say, this is my first time being on a podcast and sharing a story similar, sharing a story like this that you're sharing. There's some people out there that are going to be tuning in who, either they've already been asked to maybe do something similar. They've been asked to give their testimony, to share their story, or a time is going to come, whether they realize it or not. The time is going to come where they're going to get asked, that they're going to be offered an opportunity to get on a platform that's a safe space where they can share a story that was regarding maybe a painful time in their life, a dark time in their life. What would be your words of encouragement that you would offer them, to say to them, if you had the opportunity to do this, this is why you should do it? What would you say to them?
The first thing I would say is, one, you have to kind of sit with yourself and make sure that, depending on the topic that you're going to be discussing, or the topics that you're going to be discussing, you need to sit with yourself and you need to make sure that you're ready, because you may not be ready. You need to be in a good place to where you're ready to be able to open yourself up and share your story, and do it in a way that can be encouraging, that can be uplifting, and can be helpful. If you know that you are still in a very fragile state, this may the time maybe you could tell the person, I don't think I'm ready currently, but I definitely will reach back out later once I'm in a better place. That's to anybody that may not be ready. For those who feel like they are absolutely ready and they are contemplating being on a podcast, I would say pray about it. Make sure that you go into it with a pure heart. Okay. Make sure that, again, you're in a good place and that you are ready to discuss the topics at hand, because you are putting yourself out there. You do not know who is going to watch your episode. It's going out, it's on the World Wide Web. Anybody can see it. So make sure that the message that you're sharing is authentic, that it's uplifting and encouraging, and that the information that you're going to share, you're okay with it being out there. Because again, once the episode goes live, it's live at that point. There's no going back. So I would encourage them, go give it a chance. Give it a chance. Like I said, if you're in a good place in your life to be able to discuss the topic that's been pitched to you, go ahead and give it a chance. And you might be a little nervous. Everybody's a little nervous. You might be a little nervous, but practice. Like I always tell my students, because they have to give presentations in class, practice. Just sit, go through the questions. If you got, questions ahead of time that you're going to be asked, go through the questions, read them, think about what you would say. It's not necessarily like you said, coming up with a script per se, because you do want it to be very authentic and pure and in the moment. But at least think about what it is that you're going to discuss, and how you're going to get your message across. And then what type of message you want to put out there and how you want to look. Like, not saying that you have to put on a front or anything like that, but again, you want to be authentic. So go through the questions and get yourself prepared for the episode. And then just go for it. Just go for it. Don't overthink it, because a lot of times we can get in our own way and we can into analysis paralysis. I'm guilty of doing that and some things in my life. But don't overthink it. Just go. But also, one other thing I want to say, just like we know that your space is a safe space, make sure that if you have been invited onto a podcast, if you're not sure about the podcast, meaning you don't know a lot of information about it, maybe research beforehand, watch some episodes that they've had before, and figure out, is this a safe space for me to tell my story? Because just like you said, Joe, you're not into reality television, you're not trying to embarrass anyone. But we do know that out there like that. So do your research about the show and make sure that it's a safe space for you to go share your story, and that you're not going to be bombarded or surprised by any type of behavior that would be harmful and disrespectful to you. But I think it's a good thing to do. I think it's a form of therapy. It's a positive thing if you do it with the right intentions.
I love that approach. I definitely would second about you doing your research, because there's so many podcasts out here, and like I said,
Absolutely.
I'm still a newbie to a certain extent. I mean, in season 3, but at the same time, it is important to know what's the format going to be like. What's your host like? What's the vibe like? And usually the best way to do that, as you shared, just check out a few episodes
Mm-hmm.
that they've done before. Don't ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, like you said, don't overthink it, but at the same time, make sure that this is a safe space. Like you said, do that self check of you to make sure,
Mm-hmm.
am I in a space, am I in a place to where I'm ready to share, and separate it from being just because I'm nervous
Mm-hmm.
versus where I am in that situation that I'm dealing with right now. Am
Right,
I ready in
right.
that regard? Because while I have been fortunate enough where most people that I've asked to come on have said yes, the few times that I've gotten a no, it's usually been because where a person is right now in
Mm-hmm.
their situation, in their pain, the wound is just too fresh to where
Yes,
they're
yes.
not ready to, they haven't arrived in their healing journey. They're not far enough along to where they're
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in sharing. And I respect that. I would
Mm-hmm.
rather you just tell me. And usually my response back to individuals like that is just simply say, what, hey, consider your invitation open,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever you're ready, reach out to me and we'll make it happen. No
Mm-hmm.
pressure, no anything like that. And then, like you said, as far as the practice is more about not so much rehearsing out answers that you're going to say, but like you said, if you've been fortunate enough where the host is giving you, which a good host is going to give you at least a general outline
Mm-hmm.
of what's
Mm-hmm.
going to be asked. They'll give you a general sum of questions that they could give you 10 questions and they may ask you 5 of them. They'll
Mm-hmm.
give you a
Mm-hmm.
feel for where the direction of the conversation is going. So just ask yourself, if this is one of the questions that gets asked, how, what is my comfort level in talking about
Mm-hmm.
that? And if you can find yourself being able to be comfortable in any of the questions that might get asked, then that's usually the signal, the confirmation for you that this is something that you can go take that leap on and doing, even if you got nerves, because everybody's going to
Right.
always have nerves. Even a host has
Mm-hmm.
nerves,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because you want to make sure that you again maintain a certain demeanor, that you be mindful of your facial expressions, especially when, because I've had a chance to hear some some really deep stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
divorce has been one of those stories that I've heard on a number of occasions, but I've heard about, sexual abuse. I've heard about,
Mhm. Mhm.
financial challenges. I've heard about physical domestic violence. I've heard about, illnesses that were close to being life threatening.
Mhm.
I'm running out of stuff that I haven't heard just yet. As far as
Mhm.
and just when I think I've heard it all, I have a guest that hits me with something. I'm like, oh my goodness, where that came from.
Mhm.
And so just being sensitive to that, being aware of my demeanor, my overall, tone and everything. Those are things that as a host, you try to, keep your nerves calm, keep
Mhm.
make sure my energy is balanced and I'm not dominating the conversation, that I'm not, being dismissive of what somebody says or anything like that. So the nerves are going to be there across the board. I don't care how long
Yes,
you
they
do it.
will.
But it's just one of those things though that you can work through because of what the intention is behind it, whether you're the host or whether you're the guest. If you, as you said, if you're coming into that situation with the right mindset and the right intent, then you'll be surprised how smoothly it flows. And that's some of the feedback that I've gotten on many shows where people were like, "This went way smoother than I thought it was going to go."
Mhm.
Even in some instances, I've had many people actually say to me that they thought that they were going to talk about one thing, and they ended up sharing way
Mhm.
more than what they thought they were going to share. But that's just them
Mhm.
allowing God to use them to as they're led to speak. And when
Mhm.
you're comfortable, when you are in a safe space, then you're more relaxed and more likely to get out just what needs to be said. That doesn't mean that you gave an every blow by blow detail, but it was just
Oh, right.
enough. It
Yes.
was just enough to get the point across. It was just enough to be the blessing that we intended for it to be for those who are on the receiving end and listening to it. So I definitely, again, I love your advice to those who have either been offered the opportunity or may get offered the opportunity somewhere down the road. Definitely consider it, because again, at the end of the day, if you have an opportunity to share your testimony and bless someone, then that in itself is reason enough to exercise, to tap into a little bit of courage and strength, if you will, to go ahead and
Mhm.
just make it happen. And you'll be amazed, as to how proud you will
Yes.
be of
True.
yourself, how
Very
you will
true.
feel, and again, how other people are going to feel because you were thoughtful enough and loving enough to think about other people, even in the
Mhm.
midst of your own painful situation. So
That's very true.
so Tia, this has been awesome. Kind of catching up with you, seeing what's going on. But as is the case with every broadcast, we want to take an opportunity to take some time to love on you, to catch
Thank
up and
you.
see what's going on with you. Any exciting things professionally and or personally. But one thing in particular that I want you to share is, again, your core story was about divorce, but you've actually had some things take place since you were last on the show that is directly connected to the story that you shared. So if you would start off with that and kind of give us an update as to what's happened since the quote unquote divorce, that we need to know about, that is worthy of discussion, as well as of course other things that you got going on as well. So start with, first off, what's been happening since the divorce. Where are you at, and what's been going on in your life since then?
So since the divorce, we have reconciled. Me and my ex, we have reconciled. We are back in a relationship. We're not remarried yet, but we are definitely back in a relationship. It took some work. It took some work. I, it took a lot of work on his part, but I'm not going to just lay it all on him. It took some work on both of our parts because while he was off working on himself, I was, as we know, working on myself. And one of the things that I spoke about on the previous podcast episode was that even though there were some things that he needed to work on within himself, that I knew that there were things that I needed to work on because I didn't always show up as my best as a wife. And so I thought, even though this relationship didn't work out, I should still work on these things because it's only right. It will only prepare me for the next relationship so I can show up better in the next relationship. And so we have started a new relationship. We both came to the relationship, even though we knew each other. We've already been married before we spent this long lifetime together. the two people that showed up in this new relationship are not the two people that were in the last relationship. So that relationship is over. So we both showed up differently in this relationship. Like I said, he worked on himself, I worked on myself. So we came together better than we were before. Not to say we're perfect because we're not, but we are definitely in a better space, a better place. And the fact that empty nesters now makes it even more sweet. We love the kids, we definitely love the kids, but if it's great to kind of just have your own little space and learn each other again, get to know each other again. And again, it's almost, I won't call it weird, but it's almost kind of, you can't believe that it feels like we are two new people that met and connected and have fallen in love again with each other. It's like we know who we are, but it still feels new. It still feels fresh. um and okay, we have the added benefit of having a history together.
Mhm.
So that made the coming back together a little bit smooth. Went to meet someone new, you're going to kind of be a little bit more apprehensive about things because you don't know that person. But again, we're doing well. We both communicate a lot better now than we did before. One of the things that I can say about him is that he is very much more open to admitting when he's wrong. He took account for all of his actions because let me make this clear. You and I would not be having this discussion of reconciliation had he had not been able to get to a point where he took accountability for his actions, took accountability, made no excuses, and apologized for the things that he did that got us to a fragile place. And I did the same. I apologized for the things and took accountability for the things that I felt that I contributed to the marriage that got us to a fragile place. So the fact that he was able to do that and that he's more forthcoming with that today makes it a lot easier for me to open myself up again to him. Because again, if he would have showed back up, because he pursued me again, this second time around, but if he would have shown up and he would have been making excuses and not taking accountability, it would have been an end of discussion. We wouldn't even be discussing this. I would have never given him the opportunity. But I could tell that he did a lot of work on himself. I did a lot of work on myself. And more importantly, I felt comfortable giving him another chance. Like at first, it was a little bit nerve wracking because you were so worried about what other people would say, how other people would react to the fact that you're reconciling with your ex-husband, right? People will have a lot of feelings about that. Some people will project some of their own feelings because maybe they've gone through a divorce and things didn't work out the same way in their situation. So they're going to throw all the things at you. So I was a little concerned about that at first because I'm like, people are going to have so much to say. But then when I sat down and I thought about it, first of all, we're two adults, right? We're two adults. We don't owe anybody any explanation. We don't need to seek anyone else's approval. The only approval that matters is the two of ours. But then our families supported us. So I think that made it a lot easier as well because like I said earlier, we have families that we share. And they were so encouraging and so accepting and motivating of it. That just made it a little bit easier for us to kind of decide to go on this path. And then my best friend and our kids, like everybody was really supportive. So that helped. But yes, we are definitely reconciled and there will be another wedding someday. So you
That
have it here first. You heard it.
Wow, wow. Well, of course, that's awesome news. This is definitely the first time in the episodes that I've had that have focused on a divorce where I've heard about the reconciliation piece of it. I have had people on board who've gotten divorced, and they may have come back and talked about, getting remarried, finding new love, which is that's great too.
Hmm.
But
Yes, it
I
is.
think what's really powerful about the fact that you all have chosen to reconcile is just one, we don't see a lot of this very often, and secondly, it speaks to the word to use actually is that there's clearly some forgiveness that has taken
Hmm.
place. Again, not to take away, not to share too much of the story from those who haven't had a chance to check it out. But one of the issues that kind of led to the divorce to begin with, one of those topics centered around infidelity. And so when you
Hmm.
have something like that, the average woman or average man even, a lot of times when that's in the mix and a decision is made to get a divorce, usually if it got to the point where the actual paperwork was signed and all of that, it's a wrap. And there's no coming
Hmm.
back from that. So it takes a lot for any spouse to know that that was a piece of the reason why things didn't play out, in terms of the marriage lasting and ultimately coming to a divorce, to where you were able to get past that. And when I say get past it, I don't mean that you condone the behavior,
Oh
that you've
no,
accepted as being the right thing. Anything that took place that led up to the divorce that was wrong, whether it was on your part or on his part. If it was wrong, it was wrong.
absolutely, it was wrong.
We're not going to act like that it's no longer wrong. It was wrong.
That is
But
so true.
when you can, part of the healing process that I think a lot of people don't understand, you clearly have gained an understanding of it, and so has he, is that if you really want to heal, the first step in igniting the healing process, the very first step, is the willingness to forgive.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think even if you all had not reconciled, your healing was able to be facilitated in the way that it was because you forgave. You
Absolutely.
said, you know what, I didn't like being in that situation. What happened happened. I don't think of you as this horrible person. I forgive, but you're forgiving as you, if oftentimes have heard, the forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you.
That's right.
And so for
That's
your
right.
ability to forgive what from a worldly perspective is considered to be an unforgivable offense, for you to forgive it
Absolutely.
is
Hmm.
huge in your healing process,
Hmm.
because again, whether it was a reconciliation with him or whether it was some brother that was to come down your path in the future,
Hmm.
you wouldn't have been able to receive either if you hadn't
Hmm.
forgiven. What you would have done is you would have
Hmm.
taken that same pain, that same anger, that same hurt into the new relationship, and perhaps created a more toxic situation and something new that might have been
Hmm.
a completely different experience, a positive experience, but it would have never transpired into that because it couldn't, because you came
Hmm.
in unhealed. You came
Hmm.
in with unforgiveness in your heart, and so this new guy or the new girl, if it was a reverse roles, they would have been feeling like, well, what did I do? They would have been taking the brunt off of the person from the past,
Hmm.
because you haven't gotten through that.
Hmm.
So that to me is huge in that regard, the forgiveness piece, and then, like I said, the fact that once the reconciliation began, like you said, you took accountability, he took accountability, and it's almost like you said, it's two different people. We recognize each other, we're familiar with each other because we got a past, but the versions of ourselves are different. And I think there's a lesson to learn in your situation, just for those of us who haven't necessarily crossed that path of divorce, but maybe we're still married, but we've allowed our marriage maybe to get stale.
Right.
Um,
And that's a big thing. Yes.
sometimes there's a lot of couples out here who are, the best way I can describe it is like, we are divorced, just not legally.
That's
we
right.
we we in the same house,
Hmm.
we're tolerating each other in the
Hmm.
marriage, but mentally and or emotionally we're already divorced.
Yes.
And in order for us to reconcile in our marriage, we need to take on some accountability. We
Hmm.
need to do some forgiving.
Hmm.
If necessary, we need to incorporate some therapy
Absolutely.
where both parties are active participants.
Hmm.
And from there, there's a chance for those marriages that are still officially alive, but maybe are emotionally or mentally on life support. There's
Hmm.
an opportunity to revive that marriage,
Hmm.
to add that freshness back again, almost the equivalent to like we go back to like dating each other again. You
Yes,
know,
yes.
falling in love all over again.
Hmm.
So that's again with your story. It's even significant for people who are married, but
And I
maybe
want to
there's
say,
a drop off. Go ahead. Yes.
I want to say that, uh, I kind of walk a thin line when I tell the story of a reconciliation, like you said, after an infidelity. I don't want, anyone who has experienced that or is experiencing that to think that what I've decided is best for me has to be the decision that they make. If someone feels like if that happened in my relationship, that's the end, we're done, I don't ever want to be with that person again, I totally understand how you could feel that way because it is a devastating thing to experience. But I still encourage you to go through your healing process because, like you said, you may want to be in a relationship with someone else and you do not want to get into a new relationship and bring a bunch of baggage from an old relationship. So I still encourage that part. But yeah, by no means think, I mean, I hope my story is encouraging, but it is one of those stories where it's like, I can't believe, she went back. Trust me, it was not a rash decision. When I got a divorce, my mindset at that moment was that is it. It's done. It's over. I wish him well. I hope he goes off and lives a great life, and I'm going to do the same. But it just so happens that our story wasn't over. And that is just a decision that we made, and it works for us. But just keep in mind that what works for one couple may not work for the next. So I just want to put that out there for all the people that might be like, she must be crazy if she thinks that I'm going to go back. No, no, no. You do not have to. That is the beauty of being an individual and being able to make your own choices is that you do not have to go back. Because let's be honest, not everybody deserves a second chance. There are some situations where by no means should you go back. I'm just telling my story and what has worked for me and what's happening in my life.
And I love that you broke that distinction down. That, like I said, what was worked for you won't necessarily work for somebody else because
Absolutely.
there's levels to infidelity.
Yes, there is.
For some it's a one time instance. For
Hmm.
others, you've been all around town and through the state
Spreading it all around.
for spreading all your love around. And in some
Hmm.
situations, infidelity has brought in children that weren't
Yes,
previous. So it's a lot of stuff that could go on that could make that dynamic be a whole
a
lot
lot
different.
more
But but
difficult.
but
Yes,
regardless of the situation, if you want to heal, you have to arrive at a point where you do forgive. And again,
yes,
don't
yes.
confuse forgiving with condoning the behavior because they're
Right.
not
It
one and
doesn't
the same.
absolve them from the
No.
things that they did. It is for you to free yourself so you are not carrying that bondage around and like I said, taking it into other relationships and not just other relationships with a potential partner, but even relationships with your children, relationship with
Mm-hmm.
your other family members, relationships with your friends. When you have a lot of baggage that you're carrying, you are going to lash out. You are going to, that baggage is going to show up in all of your relationships. So if you do not get to a place of healing and a place of forgiveness, it's going to eat you up. That to me is like when you were talking earlier about some of the things that people do when they're kind of going through a divorce or they may be going through a difficult time. They may get on drugs, they may, contemplate suicide. I'm not going to speak as a professional, a mental health professional or anything like that. But what I will say is some of that can be because you are not forgiving. You are holding everything in and it's eating away at you. And I know everybody is not about forgiving. I get it. There's some people like, I ain't forgiving him or her. I'm just not gonna do it. And okay, that's your choice. Like I said, everybody gets to make their own choice. But I know for me personally, if I wouldn't have done that, I would not be as happy and fulfilled with my life as I am today, whether we were back together or not. Because my whole purpose was it wasn't about a partner that I'm with. I wanted to be happy and whole as an individual. And if someone gets to come and share in my happiness, I was receptive to that, but my happiness was never going to be dependent on another
Hmm.
person. No other person is responsible for your happiness. You are the only person that is responsible for that. So, yeah, forgiveness is definitely necessary if you so choose to allow yourself to forgive, but it was the right thing for me.
Love that. Love that. Um, Definitely a beautiful testimony. Definitely a happy ending, and I
Mhm.
use the word ending loosely because it's still in progress.
It's in
But
progress.
but at least you're heading in a direction. And for those who are wondering, you know, where is the other half? We did have a conversation about him appearing. And as we shared earlier, sometimes people are just not quite ready for that, and we respect
Absolutely.
that. But Tia has agreed that if by chance the time comes where he's more comfortable, then you will see a part three
You
to this
got
episode
it.
where you'll actually get a chance to hear his side of it, and perhaps maybe by then we're already talking about wedding plans, or maybe the wedding's already
Hmm.
happened and all those good things. So we'll have some even further follow up to what has otherwise been a very great story of trials, of tribulation, but also leaning into God, because don't let's not get confused. Therapy is great, and dealing with all of the stages of grief is great, but ultimately for something like this to take place, for this transformation to take place, and a restoration to take place like this, God is all over this. God is
He's
involved.
all
So
over it.
um
That is so true.
yes, so we do not want to eliminate him from the mix of how this story has transpired the way that it has. So definitely want to keep that in mind. So
Yes.
so Tia, again, great update to your story. I'm glad to hear that. Again, I personally obviously know you and your husband, and
Hmm.
so I got a personal interest in the story, firsthand. So yeah, I'm that's good news. I'm glad for that.
Thank you.
So and again, you sharing that in the way that you shared, I'm certain that that's going to be a blessing. That somebody's going to be tuning in, and they might be close on that edge of trying to think, should I give it another shot or not? There clearly are some scenarios where you don't want to give a certain, a second shot,
Hmm.
because it
That's
could just
true.
be it could be a safety issue why you don't give
Yes,
another shot.
absolutely.
So, we're not in any way just saying, one box, one size fits all type situation. Everybody's situation is unique, but the one thing that is universal is the forgiveness piece.
Hmm.
If you want to heal in the way that God intends for us to heal in moments of trial and adversity and such, remember that component of him, and remember that component of the forgiveness piece.
Hmm.
So definitely keep that in mind. So before I let you go, is there anything else that you got going on professionally and or personally that we need to know about, that you got coming up or going on right now, that we can celebrate, that we can love on you about? Anything like that that people need to be aware of?
Thank you. So when we talked last time on the podcast, and I believe I might be confusing this one with the other one, but I'm pretty sure it was this one. I stated that I was working on a lifestyle brand, that I intended to work on a lifestyle brand. So some time has
Hmm.
passed, and I kind of was slowly working on that. So things are ramping up now. So I will be having a lifestyle brand where I'm going to just cover different content, different lifestyle content, and then also continuing to manage and operate my interior design business. I'm going to take a lot of the services that I offer virtually, because there are lots of people that are outside of Metro Atlanta that want to work with an interior designer, and they may want to work with me, and we can do this virtually versus me having to be local, which is also a great thing. So I'm going to have some private clients here and some virtual clients as well. So the lifestyle brand, the interior design brand. So those are the things that I'm working on. I'm trying to be kind of like the Black Martha Stewart. That is the direction that I would love to go in.
That is awesome. So if people want to connect with your services, again, whether it's because they're in the area, at the Atlanta metro area, or do so virtually, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and find out, about how to, tap into your services?
So right now, I would say they can just go to my website because I'm redoing some of my websites. But for now, tiaspaulding.com. They can go, and that's T as in Tom, IA. Spaulding is Spaulding, and then .com. And that will give all my services that I currently have because I haven't fully launched the new website yet, which will have all of my virtual services. So if they want to work with me, and even if it's virtually now, and it's not listed all on my website as virtual, we can still work together because that is definitely the direction that I'm going in. So they can find me at tspalding.com.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And again, she's a definitely a creative soul. So she's gonna do you right, and she's gonna pay attention to all of the particulars and the details. We've had the pleasure of benefiting from some of her work, and we still got some more to do with her to finish it all
Absolutely.
up. But yeah, she knows her stuff. She's gonna have you right, you know. And we I think our last time you were on, and if I didn't, I'm gonna bring it up again. I know we've talked about it, you know, one on one. Is we're gonna speak into existence that HGTV show and that new
Oh,
line of you know Tia's collection, whatever we're gonna call it, you know.
absolutely. A line. I
So
would
you
love
know
that.
that
Yes.
would be a beautiful thing, and again, seeing your skill sets and your talents, it would not surprise me one bit if that actually becomes a reality, and one day we're legitimately talking that that's a real thing, and we can go online and buy some stuff and do
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that's a great thing. You do some great work, and I'm
Thank
proud
you.
of you, and wish nothing but God's blessings and favors on your work, as well as, of course, your reconciliation. You know, you and your
Mm-hmm.
husband, and continue that continues on the right path, and ultimately get you
Yes.
officially back
Yes.
in standing the way that we had a chance to know you to be in previously. So that's a beautiful thing. So again, Tia, thank you so much for being on the
Thank
show,
you.
coming back once again, and again, as I said before, the invitation is open for round three. If once hubby decides that if he should decide he's comfortable, we would love to
Mm-hmm.
have him to get the
Thank
male
you.
perspective side of it as well. You know, we want to be
Mm-hmm.
fair to him too. So
Yes,
let
I
him know
appreciate that.
that invitation is open to him whenever he's ready.
Thank you.
And yes, absolutely. And so for my listeners, again, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please share, please like, please subscribe, please comment, because again, this is what the Blessings in the Streets podcast is all about: inspiring, encouraging, uplifting. We even have moments where we bring back past guests, as we did today, to share, you know, what their experiences were like. And in this case, you got a special treat today, a feel good story. So, as I shared at the top of the broadcast, if you haven't had a chance to watch the original Blueprint to Blessings episode, please do your search on my YouTube channel and check it out. And then, of course, you'll have an opportunity to follow up with this one. It'll be an awesome story time for you. And again, it'll be a great blessing to many. So I definitely encourage you to tune in. But if nothing else, if you haven't picked up on anything else today, remember that when it comes to dealing with our adversities and challenges of life, you don't have to do that by yourself. You don't have to carry that weight, that burden all on your own. There is a God out here who loves you, wants nothing but the best for you. He wants a relationship with you. And so if you don't currently have such a relationship with him, today is a mighty fine day to make that happen. And it'll be the greatest, best decision that you ever make in life. He wants to be there for you. He wants to support you, encourage you, uplift you, protect you, provide for you. You will not go wrong being in relationship with him, because nothing is too big for him to handle, as is evidence today with the story that you heard. Nothing is too big, nothing is too great. He's always going to give you just the right advice, just the right thoughts on a matter. You just have to trust. You have to have that faith in him and depend upon him and allow him to guide your steps. And he will not, again, he will not steer you wrong. So, with that said, remember, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and I thank you so much again for tuning in. And until next time, you keep fighting that good fight. Continue to lean on God, continue to depend upon him, trust him, follow his way, follow his directions. He won't lead you wrong. And I promise you, when you embrace him, when you take on whatever he has to offer to you, blessings will be abound in abundance for you, as well as you'll be equipped to be a blessing to other people as well. So always keep that in mind, keep that in your heart. And until next time, you take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great rest of your evening.